Recording in progress.
Good evening, everybody. Just getting everybody in the room here.
Rick, this is Al. Is everybody on now?
Everybody who is in the waiting room has now been admitted, and I'll keep my eye on it, and we'll just make sure everybody else gets added as they come in.
Well, thank you all, and thank you, Rick and his staff, for hosting us in essence on the Zoom call tonight. I show it's 6 o'clock, so we'll go ahead and start call to order. Let's do a roll call. And Rick, who's going to be calling roll tonight?
Let's see. I think I'll go ahead and do that on my end.
Okay.
Okay, so let's see. So I'll just go down the list of participants here. Al Mateco,
Here.
Natalie Smith,
Present.
Doris,
Here.
and Nick.
Here.
Sarah McIntyre.
Hello.
Let's see, they're bouncing around in order on me. So if I call you a second time, please forgive me. Brent Usher.
I'm here.
All right. Mitzi Olson,
Here.
Danny Smith,
Here.
Denise. I see Denise waving. Thank you, Denise. Greg Williams.
Here.
Grover Bornfeld.
I'm here.
Thanks, Grover. Who do we have from Lake Oswego Library?
Hello, this is Melissa Kelly.
Mark Ponelli.
Sherry Slackhammer.
Great. And let's see, Natalie McNown. Oh, there she is. Thank you. I was glancing through my grid here. Let's see, Doug Erickson.
I'm here.
And Shasta.
Here.
Let me admit another 2 people in here. Just connecting to audio now. All right, so Desiree, we were just taking roll call, so Desiree is here.
Here.
And then it looks like somebody's connecting for NOS. Can you tell me who that is?
You mean us from Canada?
I believe so. All right, and so I think we've got everybody. If I didn't call your name, go ahead and shout it out. But I think
Kathleen
we've-
Drain here.
Oh, there you are. Thank you, Kathleen. All right, I think we've got everybody there, Al, and nobody else is in the waiting room at this point.
Sounds-
I'll just go ahead and remind everybody, if you can, mute your mics while you're not speaking, and that way we'll eliminate some feedback.
Well, thanks so much, everybody, for joining us. I know it's early. Most of you probably haven't had dinner, so we'll go through and we'll get our work done. In terms of seeing everybody, Rick, I can't see anybody today. All I do is, and that's all right, maybe. But if you have a question, Rick, do you have the full picture of everybody?
I do, yeah. I should be able to see everybody if they pop up.
If you have a question, just raise your hand and Rick I'll have Rick identify the questioner. So the first, if that's all right with everybody, because all I can see is just a black box saying Rick Peterson. Maybe everybody else has a different screen. But the screen in front of me now shows the agenda for today. We've done our roll call. And we'll go ahead, and I see NOS is not microphone work. But the approval of minutes, are there any changes, additions, or corrections to the minutes? And I want to give credit to Rick and his staff. Great job on the minutes, because almost every thought and idea is recorded in those minutes. And when you read back through them, it's like, wow, very well done. But anyway, are there any changes, additions, corrections to the minutes?
No, I do have a comment, though, about one of the starting paragraph when it uses the term that district revenues for revenue, debt, and allocated costs. But they don't describe allocated costs. And in truth, in the documents, it's not called allocated costs. It's called administrative. And allocated costs is what we call it after the fact.
Mhm.
And in the IGA, it specifically states what those administrative costs need to provide. As so allocated costs kind of makes it confusing for some of the people who haven't been here for the whole time.
Good point, Grover. Thank you.
But I
Other-
thought these were minutes. Is allocated cost what people used in that, in the talk in the minutes? Are we changing what someone said, or?
Well,
Yeah, that-
actually, it is speaking that Rick was reminding us of that. And did he say allocated costs? And by the way, I couldn't agree more. These minutes are phenomenal.
Yeah,
But
we were using the term allocated costs, but we can, you know,
But if you use them in the meeting, that's what the minutes should reflect.
yeah, maybe we can add in parentheses. I suppose we could add that to administrative costs for clarification. Grover, does that work for you?
That'd be great. Thanks.
Sure.
Okay, thank you, Grover. Thank you, Nick. Other changes, deletions, additions to the minutes? Is there an approval for the minutes?
I'd like to make a motion that we approve the meeting minutes.
I'll second that.
Okay, it's been seconded by Natalie and Nick.
Okay.
So for a vote, I'm just gonna have, to because I can't see everybody, unfortunately, I'm just gonna have to have Rick go through the roll call and ask yay or nay. Yay for the approval, and nay for not approving them. So Rick, would you mind?
Want to use the thumbs up on your screen. If you've got that, you're welcome to do that. If I don't see the thumbs up on the screen, I will go ahead and call out your name here. So Al,
Approve, yay, a yay.
Grover,
Approve.
Natalie M, I saw your thumb up. Thank you.
Yeah, that's Natalie Smith.
Yeah, Natalie Smith too. I haven't got to you yet. Lake Oswego, we got thumbs up there. Kathleen. Oh, just a second, Kathleen, you were on mute there.
Approve.
Perfect, thank you. Let's see who we got next. Nick, I thought I saw a thumbs up. Is that right?
Yes,
Yep.
I agree.
Excellent. Thank you. Desiree, thumbs up. Thank you. Natalie Smith, that was an approve from you, right?
Yes,
Great. And Denise, did I see a thumbs up from you as well? And then let's see, we got Denise's. And then for NOS. Perfect, thank you. We got everybody, so they have been approved. Oh, you're on mute there.
Got to remind myself we're on a Zoom call, not in person. So I apologize for being on mute at times. So we've gone through this. Can you pull up the agenda again, Rick, for everybody?
You bet.
Okay. So the old business, were there any updates before we go to old business? I want to go right to old business, but are there any updates that we need to be aware of from anybody?
I just had a real quick one, Al, that we did last time. Greg had pointed directly, thank you for that, to an old example of a letter that this group provided to the board. Unfortunately, even despite those excellent instructions, we couldn't locate them. That both KT and I were looking for those and we weren't able to find it. So we don't have an example from before, but I don't think that'll hold us up here.
Okay, thank you. Any other updates? Okay, moving right along, the finalize the letter. I want to thank everybody for their excellent work. Kathleen in particular, and Rick in particular for their work in helping craft the letter to the BCC. Is it perfect? No. I will say it's not perfect because it's hard to obtain perfect, but I like the spirit and the tone of it, of saying basically that we're all in this together and we're trying to make headway of things. So can you bring up that letter for everybody, Rick? Now, group, do we want to go through the letter paragraph by paragraph, or this is very hard because I know on Zoom call, we don't see everybody. How do we, maybe we should just go through it paragraph by paragraph. And that way, if there's a discussion, we can discuss on that particular paragraph as how it relates to the whole. So on the first paragraph, if everybody could just give a thumbs up maybe for Rick if they like it, or a sideways thumb if you have a question on it.
See thumbs up there. I'm not seeing any questions.
Okay. Okay, let's move on to the second paragraph, which talks about the COVID delays. Can we thumbs up again for you like the paragraph, quite as sideways if you have a question or concern on that paragraph?
Yeah, and I would say go ahead and if you want to raise your hand if you got a question, or just speak up if I don't catch you with your hand up.
Okay, let's go to the third paragraph.
Oops, wait, we got a hand up from Lake Oswego.
Go ahead, Lake Oswego.
Hey, all, this is Mark Connerly speaking. My question is in regards to the inability to approve the annual reports. In some written feedback that I gave to Rick that I think he passed on to the committee who was crafting the letter, I made the observation, I guess you could call it a suggestion, that for the sake of moving forward, we have two choices. We are unable to approve is one choice that puts us kind of in a holding pattern until the board makes a decision. The other option is to say, we approve this backlog of annual reports with the annotation stipulation that this issue of capital and debt repayment exists, and the board needs to provide clarity on that before next round of the. And I don't know if anybody else wants to have any discussion about that, but I see two options there. I have a preference, but I thought I would at least raise it as by saying we are unable to approve. We're saying we're not going to approve until they give us direction, as opposed to saying we approve with this issue that they need to resolve before the next group.
What would you prefer seeing that in there?
Grover has his hand up.
Okay,
Yeah, I just want to say, when you read our guidance in the IGA, our guidance doesn't say we're supposed to approve or not approve. Our job is to evaluate.
Sorry. Thank you for calling that out, Grover. And I actually like that language even better. We should say we have evaluated this backlog of annual reports for the last several years, and we are highlighting this issue to the board, and we're requesting that they resolve it. And perhaps we just do away with the whole notion of approve or disapprove. If our job is to evaluate and call out issues, then let's do that. Let's call out the issue and kind of steer away from, what our obligation is to approve or disapprove.
Grover
And
has
let
his
me-
hand up
Yeah, I
again.
just want to jump in on the tail end of that, and I appreciate that, and I actually am in favor of what you're suggesting, but it isn't even about, we don't want them to give us we want them to give us guidance, and I like that in somebody else's words, but it's guidance on how to interpret or how to address.
Well, Grover, I like what you said. Not what you said, but what you read about we are to evaluate. And then wouldn't it be our process to make a recommendation to the board as to what to do to resolve it? No? Okay.
No, because we're actually talking about the fact that because of the inconsistencies and the lack of clarity, we are unable to reach an approval, disapproval, or any of those things. So our evaluation is all those things that are not clear.
Okay.
Greg?
Greg has his hand up.
Yeah, just a question, a comment. I like Mark's suggestion. I like the usage of the term evaluate, because that is, as several have mentioned, what the IGA says. My question about this is, I know the group has been unable to reach a consensus, but is there enough of there is a difference of opinion, but I'm curious to know where those differences lie, because it seemed like the last meeting, there was a lot of people who were kind of, for the idea of, okay, yes, it'd be good to ask for this, but we don't want this to hold us up from doing more important work in the future and going forward. And I would just be concerned that sending something to the BCC that sort of implies that there's a deadlock or that this group can't move forward until you get this, that causes me a little concern.
So I appreciate, Greg, and I don't disagree with what you're saying. For me, in our last meeting, I was kind of stuck in a little sidewater in my own head and didn't talk until it became clear to me the purpose of the task force and all of that clarity about what we did or didn't do. In fact, I remember in the minutes that Kathy said, it's not that we don't understand what to do, it's that it got sidetracked because of COVID and et cetera. So it's not about redoing the task force, but the task force was clear what we needed to address for the good of moving forward, not looking backwards. And what that would take care of is even that concern about, well, 3310 said this and then there was this unspoken backroom, whatever, and that it clearly is looking forward to reform the library district, which will include looking at governance and look at operations and we'll look at funding. And will then give the voters, if it's going to be reformed, the opportunity to actually vote. And that will be clearer than it was in 3310 because not every of us can agree what it says in 3310, which is fine. It'll be clearer. And for me, it's important that in the formation of that, at some point, LDAC gets to play its part, which is helping to make recommendations for amendments, et cetera, in how that's written going forward. And then it would lead to a new IGA. Also to have LDAC be part of being clear about that, because we are the only representatives of the residents, and that's our role. And so we get to represent that in what's being said. So that's the part I want to be clear about. Moving forward is great. We already know what the issues were. We got clear about addressing it in the task force. So it's not like we don't know what to do. What's missing is moving forward to reform the library district.
Back to
I'll
that
just-
last, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to read through a couple comments here before we move on to the next person. See, Denise said, paragraph 3, I thought the intent of paragraph 3 was just to state confusion. I like how it was written. We are at an impasse. And then Natalie M said, we have been unable to reach a consensus on how to evaluate and therefore need further direction. And Denise followed up her comment with, or at least to act effectively. And then Natalie M said, or a consensus in our evaluation, rather, I don't know. And then I saw a hand up from Lake Oswego and Kathleen. I didn't see who was up first.
Yeah, I think this is Mark again from Lake Oswego. Just to follow up on what Grover said. I agree with what he said in terms of, I think we all know what we would like to see happen. We should be looking forward to make sure that these issues don't arise in the future. But we are an advisory board, right? So we are making an evaluation, we are calling out an issue, and we should request that the BCC resolve that issue. But ultimately, it's their decision how to resolve it, if to resolve it. There'll be plenty of conversations at the county commissioner level. There'll be more open meetings, I'm sure, for citizens to go attend and give their point of view. It seems like an appropriate thing for a committee like ours or an organization like ours to raise the issue, request that the BCC resolve the issue, and leave it at that, right? It's their job to decide how, when, where, if to resolve it. That's how I view it.
But how do we expect them to resolve it? Because I don't see how, I mean, we're asking them, I mean, they're gonna need support to go through and really understand it. We have at least 3, or I'm not sure how, at least a couple of the commissioners probably have not been involved with library district to any extent other than approving the budget.
I guess my point is, and correct me if I'm wrong, we can't force them to do anything, right? We can request that they do something and we can support them to the best of our ability. But all we can do, unless I'm incorrect, is request that they resolve this issue. And if they want our help, we should help them, but we can't force them to do anything, can we?
That's my understanding of it, Mark. And I think that was kind of the approach we took here with this letter, is to just lay out that there is some disagreement, there's some confusion, and that we're asking them to provide some clarification. Yeah.
I guess what I'm sorry, I have a hard time seeing hands and all that, so I apologize. Can you see me if I raise my hand?
Yeah,
I
you
can
got
see
Nick.
you.
I mean, I'm visually impaired, so that's the issue, not. In any case.
Yeah, go ahead, Nick.
In any case, like that. So are we intending to keep the three the three bullet items in there in terms of those are the questions that we have?
Yeah, I'm not sure, Al, if you want to go through the rest of the letter and then we'll get to those bullets, or if we
Well-
just want to hit on those now, or.
Let's maybe try to finish this paragraph. So, Mark, I heard you and I heard Grover, unable to reach consensus on recommending approval, maybe unable to reach consensus on how best to review the annual reports. Would that make more sense?
Well, I'm still into that issue around that, what we're actually for some guidance from them, because it's all about interpretation, and guidance would be helpful.
Yeah, I think, again, this is one person's view, right? We have done the job of evaluating these documents, right? We've been doing it for quite some time now. So I would, if I were writing this, I would say, we have evaluated these documents and we are specifically calling out these issues that we are unable to resolve or gain clarity on, or these issues that we find insufficiently clear in the master documents, right? But we've evaluated them. We've evaluated the heck out of them, and we have this issue, and we want them to fix this issue. Right?
I think we get to that later, but I'm just looking at that third paragraph where we talk about we've been able to reach a consensus. Instead of recommending approval, would it be better to say, what would you prefer, everybody? Because this is not my document, this is our document,
Right.
our letter.
So you're talking about the paragraph, it is the differences of opinion stem from.
I think the one right before that, the.
Right before that, Grover.
Paragraph 3, correct?
Correct. Where the key words, we've been able to reach a consensus on recommending, like I said, would be better to say we've been unable to reach consensus on what a complete review of the annual reports means. Because
Does anybody really feel as though we haven't done sufficient evaluation of these documents? If, as Grover said, our job is to evaluate the annual reports, I would argue that there's probably consensus that we have evaluated the documents, right? So the notion of consensus and approval is what trips me up. Our job is to evaluate. We have evaluated, and we are highlighting an issue that we request the board, the BCC, to resolve. That's how I think paragraph 3 should be phrased. And then in paragraph 4, you can talk about what the issue itself is, right, through 4 in the bullet points.
well, the thing is, if we find that there is non-compliant or breach of the library district IGA, then we refer it up to the board. So if we
But-
say if people feel that maybe something has gone astray, then we review it up to the board. So in essence, what we do is we either say yay or nay, and if there's a problem, then we pass that up to the board.
Well,
Yeah, go ahead, Greg.
quick question, Al. For what it's worth, I'm trying not to talk too much. I agree with Mark. I think Mark has hit it on the head. That yes, the evaluation has been done, and we spent a lot of time evaluating this, and this is the result of that evaluation. Al, when you say, I'm a little leery about saying something along the lines of, we're not sure. The IGA has a process by which member libraries can report problems
Mhm.
with the way
Understand.
money has been used at the library board level. That's
Right.
not, that has not happened. So I'm a little concerned about putting forward a letter that says, there's worry that there's some malfeasance going on, because I've not heard from any individual library board member bringing up to this group saying, hey, I talked with my library board, I talked with my city, I talked with my library director, and man, I'm having trouble getting this, getting this problem taken care of. And I really feel strongly that there's something bad going on. I think the conversation has been, boy, there's a lot of ambiguity here, and it would be really great to address this going forward. But I know, sorry, I heard you say that there's talk about, there's some problems here, and I'm not sure that that's the case.
No, I'm sorry. I didn't say there are problems, but one of the thoughts when LDAC was formed was if we were to discuss any non-compliance or breach. I don't think we have. I don't think there are, but I understand that if the word consensus of this, maybe we just need to eliminate this particular sentence, if that makes sense. I just want to, I'm trying to move this forward because we know there are things that we want the board to look at or address, and we really haven't approved the annual reports. We, as we've said, we don't have to approve them, but it would be nice to approve them and give it to the county boards, keeps them in the loop, so to speak. However, that's just a wish, probably on my part, as opposed to anything in the library district, the governance that we have to do. It's nice to do, I think, but not have to do, if that makes sense.
Yeah, we could certainly change that second part of that paragraph to say that the group has evaluated the reports from 17-18 through 2021. And then, yeah, whether we want to ask for clarification at that point or say that there is some disagreement as to how to interpret some of the documents.
Okay, Kathleen has her hand.
There we go.
Kathleen, go ahead.
There are some suggestions in the chat.
Kathleen, I don't know if everybody can see this, so I'll read them off. Kathleen says a consensus of what precise standard to use in certain data in the reports, in evaluating certain data in the reports. And then Denise said, and the committee's best intentions after our evaluation, we have been unable to clearly interpret. And Desiree had, right, we need to know how to sort expenses into capital improvements, to know if any funds have been used for undesignated expenses per the 2008 measure.
Kathleen here. I'm curious how Mark reacts to those. And I'd only like to say one thing. To Greg's point, I do not consider these two exercises to be mutually exclusive. Our desire to know whether the funds over the past many years are being properly spent and whether there needs to be any correction anywhere is something we need to do, as well as look forward. That's all I have to say.
Yeah, since Kathleen asked for my reaction, I think both of the proposals in the chat are better than what's in the draft letter at present. Saying that we have, I'm sorry, could you bring up the chat again? Saying that we have evaluated the reports of 17 through 21, and we are, I guess, unable to reach consensus on what precise standards to use in evaluating certain data. That's fine. Saying that after our evaluation, we have been able to clearly interpret the master documents, or however you want to phrase the set of documents, and therefore we're requesting help from BCC. Either one of those is, I think, better than what's present in the draft.
And I think that sounds great. I just want to, I like the way that starts off about due to delays caused by, because we had a pretty good sense of momentum up to the task force, and then COVID shut everything down.
So I don't know if everybody can see that. I've made that suggested change. So now that sentence reads, after evaluating annual reports for fiscal year 17-18 through fiscal year 2021, the committee has not reached consensus of, I don't know if it should be on, what precise standards to use in evaluating certain data in the reports. Does anybody have any concerns about that?
Well, Mark, give me a for instance, because there was a group of us who really, when we rewrote the the data reports several years ago, we thought we had nailed this. And I'm trying to just ascertain what you mean by precise standards that we haven't reached a consensus on.
Well, I believe those were Kathleen's words, not mine, so Kathleen should answer.
I think the 3 points that are in the proposed letter further down are precisely in those categories of our being uncertain, how we deal with debt service, how we deal prospectively with any major capital improvements that might be paid for out of district revenues. And unlike Mark, I do think that this question of how we are to interpret what general overhead costs charged by cities is to be applied. We have a standard written in the IGAs, but we don't really know how to implement it, given that many cities apply those formulas in vastly different ways. So those are the points that in my mind, we can't reach a solid agreement on because we haven't been told what to do.
And I think that does get to, when we're saying consensus on what precise standards, I think that, like Kathleen said, those 3 things or 2 things at the bottom kind of get to those are the standards where there's some disagreement on how to interpret them.
Very good. Okay, I'm fine with this. And for the sake of moving things along, because I want us to move along, but I want to hear everybody's voice. So how does everybody feel about that paragraph with Mark and Kathleen's addition, that one last sentence there on the 3rd paragraph? Has not reached consensus on precise standards.
I think that's fine.
I think that's fine.
Can we have a thumbs up on this, Rick, and just tell me if anybody has a sideways thumb or down thumb?
Yeah, I would say the only, Denise brought up a point, question of the confusion is not what standard to use, but how it's interpreted. We could change that to say consensus on how to interpret standards used in evaluating certain data.
You like that suggested wording?
I could support that.
Same here.
Mark and Kathleen, how do you two feel, since you helped author this sentence?
I was waiting to see the language typed up.
Okay,
There we go. All right, so the committee has not reached consensus on how to interpret standards used in evaluating certain data in the reports. Seems to summarize the current state of things, right?
Mark, you all right with that?
Yeah, I got a thumbs up from Lake
Yep, thumbs
Oswego.
up.
Okay. Anybody with a sideways thumb, Rick? Or
Nope.
thumbs up? Okay, let's move on to the next paragraph. The difference of opinion stems. And this is just a forerunner paragraph that leads us into those 3 key points.
Is there a
Well,
reason in that paragraph you didn't include the master order? I mean, just when we talk about the governing documents of the district, usually the ones that come up are 3310, the IGA, and the master order, but only 3310 and the IGA have been called out here.
We can certainly put in the master order in there.
That's a good point. Thank you, Greg.
Any particular order?
I always do them in the order they were adopted, historical. So 3-3-10 master order and IGA. But
Perfect.
that's just my historical preference.
I'm going with that.
That makes sense.
Good job, Greg. Thank you. Okay, then the 3 points. Let's address those.
I know Grover, you mentioned allocated costs versus administrative costs.
Correct. The IGA specifically refers to them as provision of services to all district residents on the same terms. Proper expenditure of funds as described in 2-1, which is where we're reading from. Funds may be used to support general overhead or administrative costs of cities, except to the extent that such overhead or administrative costs are directly related to the provision of library services and or operations of public library. So the issue is allocated costs adequately communicating that? And that was my point. I don't think it does. It's section 2, paragraph 2.1.
So what would you suggest to change that? I do see Lake Oswego has their hand raised as well.
Go ahead, Lake Oswego.
Yes, just following up on what was just said. The IGA says that district funds may be used to support administrative costs as long as they are directly related to provisioning of library services and operation of the public library. So the way the first bullet point here is worded is it suggests that there's a question of whether district funds can be used to pay for administrative costs or not. But to the previous point, section 2.1 says district funds may be used on allocated costs. So it seems to me there's a discussion to be had about whether some cities are allocating too much, or if some cities are violating that rule, but there's no ambiguity about whether district funds can be used for administrative costs or not. They can. The question is that some folks have raised is whether some cities are violating the rule of, are they in direct support of library services or not? To me, that feels like a very different question than can district funds be used for capital reserves, for capital improvements, for debt repayment, because those things are just not, that's where the confusion lies, right? There's nothing said about that in the documents, right? And so that's why, to Kathleen mentioned this earlier, I may be the minority, but I feel as though they're two separate issues, and we're kind of confusing this letter by including them both, in my opinion. How much, to Kathleen, I see Kathleen's comment, how much is a different question from whether it is allowed or not. And the way the first bullet point is written suggests that the question is whether it's allowed or not. And I would argue the document says it is allowed.
You're absolutely right, Mark. Your clarification is appropriate.
Yeah, and we can clarify that by changing it basically to how Kathleen worded it there with how much may be used. I know I have heard this multiple times in the past that, is there evidence that libraries or concern that libraries have misused these funds? And we haven't really heard that I haven't heard that from anyone, and boards have not raised that. That would certainly be a place where library advisory boards would be bringing that concern up because they would be concerned with it, right? So I I don't know that does belong with these. Yeah, Kathleen.
It absolutely has come up. We have had several of our individual libraries, including my own, complain about the level of the amount of the district revenues that were being siphoned off for general city overhead. So I think it would probably be true that there have been several libraries that have sought to address this issue, some more successfully than others. But in any regard, it would be, I think, very helpful to every board to have some idea of what standard to apply for their within their own library service district. And we have a very good concept. And I know that when that section was enacted, it was precisely because the representatives of certainly the unincorporated residents, taxpayers, were worried that they would have no way to oversee that part of the process. They'd be relying entirely on their library board, and not all library boards have much power with their city. You know, this is a varying playing field, shall we say. That's how this came up.
Especially.
Thank you for that clarification. You also, Kathleen, you said something earlier that stuck with me. I'm paraphrasing, but you said, you know, there's not really a practical way to evaluate these allocated costs because every library, every city is different, right?
Yeah, it's hard.
I personally would feel better if this letter stuck to that point, which is there really is no practical way for this committee to evaluate allocated costs. And that's the issue we raise with the commissioners. Asking them to decide how much is allowable, what percent is allowable. I'm not sure that's where my discomfort was, right? If what you're really saying is, and I would like your response to this, if what you're really saying is there's no real practical way for this board to evaluate how the city's allocated costs are structured, and we are concerned about that, then that seems like a reasonable thing to raise.
Well, actually, I thought that the third bullet point was seeking to do that.
Correct.
You know, a little farther down. That doesn't mean that the language in the bullet points we're looking at right now doesn't need to be improved.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. We can revisit that when we get down to that question for that third issue. For now, what I've done is I've incorporated Kathleen's suggestion in the chat there, and it kind of gets to what Denise, I think Denise, your comment will get, you know, be addressed in those bullets, the other three bullets at the end. But now it says that some LDAC representatives have raised concerns about district funds being used for capital expenses or debt service, or how much, I guess, or doesn't work there, or how much district revenue may be used for general overhead and administrative costs by associated cities.
And Mark, the inherent problem is every city is different. And every city has different requirements in terms of how much HR is cost for the library or how much other things cost. So it's all depends on each city library. And really, Mark, when this money goes out, yes, we want to be good stewards of the whole county money, but it's really up to each library board in the city to say, is this being spent or not? Now, where the questions come in sometimes is when we get together as an LDAC and you compare one city to the other. For instance, Lake Oswego, you probably get money from the city. Happy Valley, Canby gets some money, but Happy Valley, other places don't get money from the city. So they have to make up things in terms of like HR costs. Doris has to budget for the HR cost of hiring people, determining other factors. Doris has to also cover for, unfortunately, law enforcement costs, which do play into libraries this day and age. So the inherent problem, Mark, that I see is each city is different when they look at their library And it's up to that individual city library board really to take the lead and saying, let's look at this budget. Let's look at how the district revenue is being spent. Are there questions when LDAC comes together? Yes, and those are the questions on capital expense debt service. Every library is different. Some have already spent money on debt service. Some are preparing the capital expenditures, but we need to, it'd be best to have the board say, okay, what are we really looking for in operational libraries? That's just the way I look at it, Mark, but I appreciate everybody's input in this.
Yeah, I appreciate that, that information, and perhaps, you know, this document evolving as we talk, right? So perhaps there should be an introductory paragraph on this allocated cost issue that basically says what you just said, right? And if at the beginning of the letter, we're gonna say, we are unclear about what standards should be applied in evaluating these documents, then the third bullet point at the end, the way it's written, I agree, asking, should we as LDAC review these costs or not? And if so, what standard should we apply? Seems like a reasonable question to ask the commissioners. I think I would feel better about it if some version of what you just said, Al, was included in the middle to explain why we have this confusion, right? We're explaining why we have confusion over the capital and debt repayment because it's not covered in the documents, blah, blah, blah. We don't really say why there's confusion over allocated costs. You did a good job of summarizing it. Maybe you could add a couple of sentences to that effect in the letter.
Well, that's done city by city, and I know for Grover, it's a little bit different probably with Oak Lodge because they're a county library. And Grover, you can touch base on that.
Yeah, I can, because the Clackamas County is a library city and they still have all the same realities of allocated costs that come from HR and technology and so on and so forth. So I think that's quite similar, not to all cities, but to many cities. The question I have is how much district revenue is not the point. It is the uses of, or it really is the direct cost portion of it, not the how much, because how much is like, well, you can only spend 10% on that. No, it's not. It is about it being directly related. And we deal with the thing about law enforcement, and we deal with the thing about HR as well.
So we could eliminate the word much, and that would say, and how district revenue may be used for general overhead. I think like Mark had said earlier, it does, you know, permit that in the documents, but if there is, or if there are questions about it, and that's what we're doing in this bullet, is basically summarizing the concern. So yeah, Grover, if others are okay with removing how much.
And
how
I am
district
too.
revenue. And as far as adding a clarification about, you know, I think that the board, I will say, and this may be an assumption, but I think the board understands what allocated costs are since they're approving the county budget. So they certainly know what allocated costs are, and they'll know that each organization does it a little differently. So I don't know that you would need a definition other than maybe that it's different in each city.
I would like to not use the word general overhead because in fact it's direct related overhead.
Well, the word is direct district funds may not be used to support general overhead or administrative costs, except to the extent are directly related. So you don't want that in there, Grover, overhead?
No, I didn't want general in there. It's not general overhead.
Well, that's what the master order says, though, general overhead.
It actually goes on to say, you are correct, general overhead or administrative costs of cities, except to the extent such overhead
Right,
and or administrative costs are directly related.
right. The second time they did.
Yeah, but overhead does not carry with that except part. That's all I'm trying to get.
Okay, good point. I hear what you're saying.
Check
You
the
address
comments.
Mark's
Okay, Kathleen, I think just wrote something up there about this, Rick, if you could read it to everybody.
Yeah, and that's what I was just gonna say is, so add to the second bullet point, or this would be the first bullet point, right?
No, it's the
Uh,
second bullet point within the first trio of bullet points. So in the next paragraph,
In
where
this.
some others contend there's room for interpretation, adding at the end of that paragraph, similarly, cities vary on how they compute their allocation of general overhead and administrative costs.
Any concerns about that?
Well, I do, because how they interpret it may be fine, but it has to still be interpreted so that it's directly related to library. That is the issue that has come up over the last many years.
Right, Grover, but what
Right,
we're
and I think
pointing out
that's in the
here
first
is
bullet.
we're merely indicating the source of confusion or difference of opinion at this point amongst the various representatives. We'll
Yeah.
ultimately get an answer on that question, I would hope, from the county.
Okay. I had one other thing on that. We keep you talking about confused. I really don't want to use, how about challenges?
Where are you talking?
Challenge,
Third paragraph.
third bullet, others are challenged.
Yeah, that's a good.
Okay, so we've changed that second one. I think that was a really good point, Kathleen, about, it's not a counter argument essentially, but it kind of shows where the confusion stands. The first one says there is concern about the way or clarification of how district revenue may be spent for that. And then in the second paragraph at the end, similarly, cities vary on how they compute their allocated costs.
I like both
How
those.
about- Does that work?
Thank you, Kathleen and Grover. And thank you, Mark, also for the comments and questions you brought in.
One question I had is, what's our expectation in terms of how they will answer these questions? Because I don't think there's enough information to frame it, and there's no, I mean, typically what I've seen happen is that I know we're a separate entity as as a library district, which is really not, I mean, it's not staffed from an administrative standpoint. So, if I don't know, I think they're going to want a lot more information about this. I don't
Yeah, and I
think
think they can. Oh, sorry to cut you off there.
No, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, I think they can come back to the group certainly for more information, if they need it. I think Paul, being part of these conversations, can certainly shed some light on some of this. I'm happy to explain or interpret terms they don't understand, or like I say, they could come back to LDAC and present those questions. So.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, I guess I'm looking at it from this, the typical way that things work, where there's a staff report and recommendations in the staff report, that type of thing, so that, it's kind of framed up for them. And I don't, like I said, we have, there's probably 3 members of the board that they're not going to have any idea what those things are.
And I just noticed there were more chats below Kathleen's last one. So sorry if I missed these earlier. Denise said, are we worried that this will be the only contact we will have with the county, which kind of gets to this point Nick's bringing up. I see this opening the dialogue and can see a couple letters. May follow this one as they respond. Are we getting too detailed? Again, I think that was kind of the point of keeping this letter concise and just summarizing it in brief, and then they can ask for more if they need to. I like challenged. And then on the third bullet point, we as a board are challenged by the apparent inconsistency in language. Yeah, and I think the we as a board there was some resistance to that in the last meeting, just because not everyone feels there is confusion. I think that's why we had it kind of in those 3 groups. The first group feels one way, second group feels another, and the third is kind of doesn't know where to go because it is confusing. So we may want to avoid that we as a board part, if everybody's okay with that.
Okay. These are three good bullet points. I really appreciate everybody's comments on those. Okay, the next one was about the original intent. Anybody have any problems with that?
Don't see any concerns there.
Okay. And then the impasse part.
I don't know about impasse because we're evaluating and we did do that. So it is that we're not recommending.
What if we just said LDAC needs clarification from the district board on the following?
Bingo.
Request.
Request, good point. LDAC request clarification is needed from on the following. Good points.
You can drop the is needed. Yeah.
I have a question about permitted. Okay, permitted based on what? Based on the existing guidelines or rules or whatever, not somebody's opinion. That's what I'm really concerned about. Sure, they say no problem.
Well, do you want to use the word legal?
Yeah, I think that was Grover maybe, yeah, but whoever made that last comment, I share the same general concern, which is if we ask yes, no questions, we're gonna get yes, no answers, and they won't provide any clarity on anything else going forward. It's almost like letting them off the hook in terms of fixing the root issue, right? Which is the ambiguity in the documents. I personally would prefer it if the request of the commissioners was to remove the ambiguities in the documents regarding these issues, right? And the issues are the use of district funds for capital, including debt repayment, capital repairs, capital reserves, and the standards by which, you know, we evaluate allocated costs, so however we want to word it. But if we just ask yes, no questions, we run the risk of them coming back and saying yes, yes, no, or no, no, yes. And then what do we do next year when there's a different question, right? We have to go back to them again.
I mean, in the end result, do we want them to update the master service agreement? Is that what we're looking for? Clarity at that level?
Yeah.
If we all agree that that's what we want, then that's what we should ask for, right? So.
I couldn't be clearer. That is not what I want. And it is that would that gives them complete option to invalidate what the voters who are paying for all this were told and could be understand.
Well, to me, that first question is very key. Is the use for building construction permitted? They need to say yay or nay. And then the second question I'm fine with. Maybe the third question should be, how should LDAC scrutinize other cities' allocated costs? Maybe we don't need to do that at all. How or should LDAC scrutinize cities' allocated costs? Maybe that's the question. And I understand what you're saying, Mark, about yes or no questions, but that first question is definitely, in my opinion, the yes or no question needed from them, because that has caused so much confusion with LDAC over the years. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I just think that I want them to say yay or nay. You can use it for building or debt or not. And then if not, then they need to tell the cities that.
So is that a definition of building? If we have we have to rent space, then is that building? I mean, that is a building. So is that on the table?
Yeah, I see 2 comments and then I see 3 people with their hand up. So Denise said, yes, Al, I agree. And Desiree said that. And then we've got 3 hands up. It looks, I believe Lake Oswego, 4 hands up now. We have Ello, then Grover, and Kathleen and Greg.
Go ahead.
Greg had his hand up first.
Oh, Greg, sorry about that. Your
No,
hand's not bright yellow like some of
no
those, so-
worries. I I think Nick asks an excellent question when we talk about using district revenue for building related costs, because you are opening a can of worms there. And there's a can of words. So I think that's good to be cognizant of. The second question, I don't remember that ever coming up, question about repairs. And I got to tell you, from an operational perspective, as somebody who's trying to run a library, if you say that you can't use district money for repairs, I mean, I've got a water heater that is broken. And so I need to replace my water heater come July 1st. That's coming out of district dollars. I can't keep a building open without repairing that water heater. When I have kids, knocking on the wall and gouging the wall, that's a repair. I'm real uncomfortable with that, how much district revenue can be spent for repairs, because you got to get to a whole definition of that. And when we get to the third bullet point, just to restate what a lot of people have said, and this has been asked before of legal counsel and former county administrators, and Paul has weighed in on this. I don't think the county can dictate, how individual cities do their allocated costs. I think as we've said, and the answer is going to be library boards need to be engaged in their budgetary process, look at those allocated costs that are being assessed, and if they have issues with them, go forward. I'm uncomfortable with asking for the county to establish a standard of what allocated costs may or may not be, how they are to be calculated, because as many have said, it's so different. There's no way to do an apples to apples comparison. So those are my comments.
All right, we had Hello, Grover, and Kathleen.
We put our hand down, so Grover can go ahead.
Okay, good. I looked farther back up in the document, and we referred to this as the district governing documents, because so if we wanted to say is use of district revenue, for debt service permitted, we need to reference this as based on district governing documents is, or how is, or something, because I appreciate what was it Mark has to say about yes, no answers. So it would be more how, according to district governing documents, not somebody's opinion, because they have to live by those same documents, in my opinion. So how is the use of district revenue for building and did that make sense? Do I have enough in there, or do I have to wordsmith it now on the screen?
No, I think that's good, Grover. Would it help to put it in the introductory sentence for those bullets? And that way, because really you want all bullets related to those governing documents, correct?
Sure. As long as I was trying to see how it factors down. Okay. Sure. Now, they request clarification of the district following related to or based on the governing documents. And it's the district governing dockets, not just it's district with a capital D.
Possessive.
Yeah, district apostrophe S. Thank you. Thank you for that, Kathleen.
Kathleen, did you have anything else to add?
No, I had two comments to make, but I'm fine with that intro.
Yeah, you can go ahead and make your comments if you'd like.
Okay, to Nick's question, rent, absolutely clear as mud.
Why is that?
Is the answer. Well, because
Clear
it
as
was
mud.
never, it was never addressed. It was never addressed. Certain libraries were paying it. Some, clearly not. Cities, it was hoped, would pick up the cost of the building, but that is one of the things that definitely needs to be clarified going forward. Right now, the only two libraries that will be paying rent going forward is the Hoodland Library, which the county has never provided a home for. And I believe Malala is still paying some rent while they are awaiting the eventual construction of a building. I think those are the only two rent situations at present. And on the question of repairs, to Greg, again, you know, repairs was a word that was in 3310 and which many people have used to justify capital expenditures. You know, from an accountant's point of view, and I've heard other directors saying this many years ago, I recall this saying, you know, they wouldn't let me buy an air conditioner because it has a 3-year depreciation schedule on it, so it's considered capital. Clearly something that needs to be fixed in Library District 2.0, right? I mean, let's get rid of the confusion and just give the directors a clear set of working ground rules.
And I totally agree with that. I'm just real worried that the way these questions are phrased, that you're asking for an answer right now. And I got to tell you, if it comes back and says I can't use library district dollars to make repairs to my building, and I'm talking about repairs, I'm not talking about, you know, typically you would capitalize a cost that expands capacity or, you know, is a major improvement, but
Not in cost allocation, not in cost accounting.
But I'm saying, well, if you capitalize, most of the repair costs that we incur here at Oregon City and other places I've worked, it's not a capitalized cost. It doesn't get added to the capital basis of the building unless it's like adding new capacity or it's an addition onto the building. If I'm swapping out a water heater, if I'm repairing a computer, you know, typically those aren't costs. I don't know. If you're asking them, I don't know. I would just be careful what you ask for, because
I would be happy
I'm
to
very
remove-
uncomfortable with this direction.
I would be happy to remove the second statement if we can stop this game of saying that the inclusion of the word repair in 3310 meant that we could have capital expenditures. We can have a 2 bullet point here. First and the third one. I'm okay with that.
And Denise had made a point in the chat about restating as building needs, which would encompass a lot of that. But like Greg said, that opens it up to, you know, if you start talking about rent, and other things, that's a big can of worms.
Well, and then Kathleen, on capital expenditures, I've mentioned this before, like, for example, we're planning on buying an outreach vehicle, right? That's a capital expenditure. That's going to be capitalized. That's going to be over $10,000 with a 1-year service. I believe that is perfectly valid to use district funds on. But if
Not everybody would agree with you.
I've never seen anything that said that wouldn't be because the discussion has always been that the separation between Estacada is because Estacada had building bonds, right? It wasn't meant to be a no capital expenditure, because again, the definition of capital, depending on where your city is, it can be anything over $5,000 with a 1-year or a 1-year useful lifespan. And if you're going to say that you can't use district dollars for anything that meets that threshold, you are going to cripple every single library that is on this call and that you claim to want to be able to provide services to them. That would be going into, you know, software contracts that we have to do. You know, it's sorry. I'm just coming from the perspective of I've got to run a library. I've got to provide service to my community. I get that there are concerns about how that may have been done in the past, but I don't know. I will ask Nick, maybe from the library board, our library board perspective. I mean, do you feel that you're not getting the information about the budgets that we put together and how we spend money and what we're planning to use them for?
No, I mean, we went deep. We did a very deep dive this year. I mean, we went through everything. I mean, we set up a separate budget committee basically to assist in that. And then it was brought back to the entire board also. And then there was our board president was actively involved in the budgeting process. I mean, he made, I don't know how many presentations to the budget committee and to the city commission. about our library funding and, you know, and actually some of the topics that we're talking about right now.
These are all good
Right.
comments. I mean, just remember, every city has to determine what the needs are. And then using the available, if you think the needs are, we need a vehicle to service populations within our community, then I would say that's allowable.
We
Because-
would, the reason we would do that is for outreach to the unincorporated.
The unincorporated.
Right.
So, and so that would be the focus of that type of program.
You know, because the IGA does specifically say each city is responsible for developing their needs. I mean, responsible for developing library services based on the needs of its service population and the available revenue. So you think that your needs are indeed to service those unincorporated areas with a vehicle to provide them library services. To me, that's acceptable, but I'm not on your board and I don't want to comment on Oregon City's boards, but I'm just reading what, you know, the IGA says on that, Greg. Grover's had his hand up for a while.
Yeah, well, I just to join in this conversation, so 3310 specifically says all monies shall be spent on library operations and services. So delivering books to people in remote areas is a service, just like when you have homebound people, all that's a method to do that. So I'm not disagreeing with you, Greg. I think that's great. And it goes on to talk about that the creation of the library district is to ensure stable, dedicated, long-term funding sources for library services, allowing libraries retain educational resources and programs. So both of those are fitting. I know in my own house, when I put a roof on, I don't get to take that as a capital expense because that's a repairing of the existing house. It is, like you say, when you expand capacity of a physical capital structure. So nobody's asking you not to use a bookmobile, and I actually think Lake Oswego would be great doing that too, because y'all keep talking about the city this, the city that, and in truth, half the money that comes in is from people who don't live in the city and don't get to.
Okay, let's get back to our letter.
Okay,
Unfortunately, I'm gonna need to get off this call at 7:30.
how do we feel about asking, is the use of district revenue for building construction permitted? Do we like that or not? I know it's a yes or no question, but I think that gets at the heart of things.
Say the question again.
Yeah,
You want a thumbs up? Is that what you're asking for?
Yes, on that first, is the use of district revenue for building construction or debt service permitted? We want that question, not, you know, how do we feel about the question, but do we want that question in there? Thumbs up if you want that in there.
Will they look at the line above it to read that, or would they just read it based on what they think?
Assume they'll read the line above it.
I would hope so.
Okay, I'll be in the hope category.
Okay, Rick, you looking at thumbs up or sideways or down?
Yep, I don't see any concern
Okay.
or sideways thumbs.
I heard a talk about the repairs. Should we just delete that next sentence?
Yes.
Yes,
And I
yes.
see Denise suggested, can we include repairs maybe in that first bullet point? After construction, so building construction / repairs.
I
And
I'd
there's
I
concerns
suggest
on-
keeping them separate.
Yeah.
Somebody has suggested building needs. The building's needs. That's general enough, isn't it?
no, as somebody who has to run a library, no.
Okay,
I mean, if my dishwasher breaks, that's a building need, right? Are you going to tell me that that was not, that I can't spend money to, you know, that I have to go find a grant to repair my dishwasher for my staff in their break room? That's,
I don't, this is Al, I don't think we even need to talk about repairs. I think it was a nice point to think about, but I think we've already said, if a repair is needed to operate the successful library for its patrons, it should be made. So I would just eliminate the word repairs in there.
agreed.
How about that second bullet then? Could add for clarification, I know there was concern earlier, we could add, whether those allocations fall within a permissible level when cities calculate these differently. Something to think about, Greg.
Just based on the discussion that was had in the bullet point above, the discussion on the bullet point above was that the how much question gets taken out. And if you're asking what a permissible level is, that's just another way of saying how much. So I would think that the question on this should more, if you want to include a question, it should reflect what the group decided to ask, which is, I mean, it's basically asking for an interpretation or clarification on the interpretation of whatever that paragraph is in the IGA 1.6 or whatever it is, right? So.
So how about that? And we've hit, we're above, we referenced that it's in relation to the district's governing documents. And so how about, if so, how can these be evaluated?
Well, okay, how about adding after that, evaluated related to cost of directly related to the provision of library services? You could put that part in quotes.
So Grover, can you say that one more time for me?
So how can they be evaluated related to, quote, costs are directly related to the provision of library services, close quote?
To the provision
Of library services.
I think that the key question for me comes into, are we really responsible for looking at each city's allocated cost? Or is that the individual cities' boards to do that?
Well, Al, we spent a long time working on revising the reporting form so that it would become clear to the rest of the world, LDAC included, how they were spending them, because in the prior mix, there was no way to know. So the idea was to be able to make it clear how they are. How they are spending.
Yeah, I'm not disagreeing with you, Grover. I'm just saying how deep this almost looks like we're going to dive deep into this. And what do we do with that information if we say we think they're overspending their allocated costs? Do we refer to the board, or do we just say it goes back to the city? Because the city would say, hey, wait a minute, you're that's our purview as the city, city manager, city council, that's our purview in terms of how the allocation of these costs are done. It's a very tricky thing is what I'm saying.
So it goes on to enforcement of terms, which is, it says that the district advisory committee is encouraged to an effort to work towards compliance. But it goes on to say that if there's not remedied and a continued failure of party to meet the service standard or other terms of this agreement, then the district advisory committee shall meet to consider an amendment to the agreement to create incentives for compliance, including but not limited to withholding funds and a whole bunch of other things. It is our job to look at that and see that they're in compliance with these governing documents. And if they're not, we're supposed to try to figure it out and work it out. And right now we're writing because it is so murkily, what you say, clear as mud, unclear what the guidance is.
I don't disagree. I just don't know how in depth we want to get on this. But I don't disagree with what you're saying. Once again, it's sort of, when you read the IGA, it almost gives interpretation that the city is responsible for developing those needs and the available revenue. It says that, and
Where does it say that? Where does it say that?
Library District IGA section 2.2.
Rick,
Yeah,
I
I think-
sent in a suggestion.
Okay. Go ahead, Rick.
Kathleen said under the standard in IGA 2.1.
to say, how can these be evaluated under the standard in IGA 2.1?
That's a good question.
So instead of the provision of library services,
Yeah, just send them to the pertinent section and
But just back to Al's point, it talks about the parties here to recognize the district is relying on good faith and commitment of the library cities to utilize the funds provided by the district in the promised manner.
I will say. I
okay,
think
let's keep
keeping-
going with the letter.
Yeah, because keeping this one broad, I think recognizes that not everyone agrees that this should even be one of the questions. So I think we can't get into more detail on that one. That's what it sounds like.
Okay, but I mean,
One quick question, do you want to say, you just say cities in that bullet point, but as Grover has said, the county qualifies as a library city under the recent amendment to the IGA, so you might want to say library cities allocated costs so that cities don't feel that you're targeting them.
no, cities are cities and Clackamas County is a library city, so they don't get special dispensation. They're just a city.
Right, but so should LDEC scrutinize library cities allocated costs? Because if you just say cities, you're saying that the county does
Yeah.
not need to be scrutinized.
I think that's a
No,
good
the
change.
IGA was actually changed to state that
Yes.
Clackamas County is a library city.
Correct. So that's, yes.
Yeah.
So we changed that to say
That-
library
that-
city.
That's
Now I
cleaner.
understand what you're saying.
Okay, and then that last paragraph.
And I think going back to Mark's original point, I think, if the committee's charge is to evaluate these, the committee is already doing that, so we wouldn't have to complete its analysis. It would just say answers to these questions will.
Guidance related to these questions?
No, actually, I disagree. Because in looking at these reports, which we have evaluated, we have found these problems. But if we get an answer that tells us that something that we have found is not permissible, then we would need to raise that.
Perhaps instead of saying permits LDAC to complete its analysis, we can say answers to these questions will highlight any further review analysis that is required. The way it's worded makes it sound like we haven't done anything, right? We haven't completed, and the fact is we've completed quite a lot. And what we're asking for is, should we do more on these specific issues or not, right? So the last paragraph should say something to that effect. The answers to these questions will clarify whether more work needs to be done on these questions or not.
And provide guidance
Yeah.
for the future.
More study, more discussion, however you want to frame it.
How about we'll clarify whether LDAC needs to pursue any topics further.
Kathleen, the paragraph or the information that got sent out earlier, I think you put together, like your last paragraph, I thought was really good in terms of looking forward and saying that, basically, that we need to look forward in terms of a new district, that type of thing. But I guess it doesn't have to be in this. That could be a separate document.
I was just hoping to emphasize the point, because it is so important that we have the BCC understand that the future work is imperative.
Right. And I thought that was good. But I mean, we're asking for these decisions that really relate to the past or the current and past, correct? How dollars have been used.
Mhm.
I can,
remedy the past and move forward to our future.
correct, and I think that's why that last paragraph that Kathleen's recommended, that finally LDAC notes that this impasse illustrates the importance of proceeding with previously planned evaluation by the district task
Okay.
force. That whole thing says we're not bogged down in this. This is what really needs to be done, but in the meantime, this is the challenge we're dealing with, which even further emphasizes the importance of looking forward.
Sure. And it goes back to the beginning of the letter where we talk about that we do get along and that COVID, in essence, really stopped a lot of the progress that we were hoping for going forward. So I think that ties it nicely.
Yeah, it ties it nicely to add it at the end to remind them. Is that what you're
Right.
saying, Al?
Yes, correct. Can we get a thumbs up on that last paragraph then, if everybody likes it or not?
Rick, do you have a copy of the last paragraph from Kathleen you can pop in here?
Let me move this far, just 1 second, it's on my.
I hate to do this, but I do need to leave because I got to be somewhere at 8 o'clock. So I'm going to have to say goodbye for now.
Just give your thumbs up, Natalie.
Hi, Natalie.
There you go.
Bye.
Thanks, Natalie.
I now,
Bye.
So this was the suggestion from Kathleen for the end of the letter. It did not sound to me like there was agreement about that via the library task force was the correct path forward. I will say that.
well, actually, I don't know that is this saying that that's it? That was the direction. Okay, let's.
Right. Because this talks about previously planned evaluation, that we're going to have the task force to improve things and to look at the funding levels. And I like the fact that the library directors did say, hey, we can't maintain current service levels. So I think that still works for me. I don't know, do people have questions? Grover, you had a question on that, sounds like.
I just had a question on what somebody's comment was just before I spoke. Says that previously planned evaluation via the library district on how to improve. So it's just the
referring
importance
to
of
order.
proceeding with previous planned evaluation. And the question was, do we have to say that via the library district task force? Or how about it's via the principles of the library district task force? Because in our own meetings, the last 3 of them, we actually kind of said that's not likely to happen again.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so it's previously planned evaluation, how to improve both the district governance, just take out the library district task force part.
I was going to say, before you do that, I think that's important to leave in there because via because the board is the one who approved the creation of that library district task force. So I think that, to me, that's important that that's in there so they know that that's, there was a good flow of energy going to that and nothing in anybody's powers could have imagined that COVID was going to come and put a cessation to everything like that. So I do like the idea of the library task force still in there, Grover.
The
Or
only
if you
thing is,
just said via the then library district task force.
Sure.
Or
The envision or the previously envisioned library
Yeah.
district task force.
what
Yeah.
about formerly via? Would
How many-
There you go.
That's what it was.
Yes.
No?
Yeah. I'm fine with that, whatever. I just want to make sure that they know that the task force was an important document and was a step forward. And I know all the commissioners weren't on there in 2019 when this was passed through, but I want them to know that we did have a task force that we were trying to move forward on.
how about the
Yeah, great.
objectives of the library district task force?
Sure. I think what Kathleen said also is make a good point of the then library district task force.
Former.
Or whatever, yeah. I see Denise says the original library district task force, but I'm fine with anything, just as long as I want them to know that that library district task force was about creating a future path for us.
Greg, do you want to?
Yeah, and this is more a question for you, Rick, because I have always operated under the assumption that I think it's good to keep the district task force in there, and I don't know that you should say it was canceled or anything like that, because my understanding is that the last direction that the BCC gave to staff on this was go forward with the library district task force, right? So I would assume that if another idea comes up, that it would go back to the BCC and say, okay, we tried to do the task force that you wanted us to do. COVID interrupted that, but we haven't had the BCC weigh in on what the successor to this is. And
Other than approving the budget where the funding for it has been eliminated.
so well, they give directions without funding them all the time. So so I don't know. I want to be respectful that, again, the last directives county staff got on this whole issue was go forth and do this task force. So, it might be good to just circle back at some point with them and formally say we can't, or the task force is not a viable option anymore. Here's our new recommendation.
Well, that's what the attempt was with the
Yeah.
last sentence.
Mhm.
And maybe how to approach this evaluation going forward.
And then, just since I'm unmuted, my other question is on the first part of that sentence is I thought we took out, again, the previous part of the letter says that the evaluation it's not an impasse. Can you just say, finally, LDAC notes the importance of proceeding with the previously planned evaluation?
Sure.
Stresses?
Strongly advocates, or strongly?
Yeah, I like strongly advocates because that says that we need direct guidance on this. So if we could put strongly advocates the importance of proceeding with the previously planned evaluation.
And the direct guidance clearly includes what the county is going to have to say about it, but also has what the cities and their city managers are going to have to say about it, and then what the voters are going to say. So it is all of the stakeholders.
Does this make sense to advocate for the importance of something? I think
No.
stresses might be a better way to just, we're stressing the importance of proceeding, if that works.
Strongly advocates for proceeding.
Well, again, as a county employee, I know Greg says that we haven't received direction, but I think the budget, it is very clear that the direction is that the task force is no longer a viable option. So I'm not comfortable saying we advocate for proceeding with the previous planned evaluation via the objectives of the library district task force.
But we're not saying
Objectives
that,
kind of
we're not saying
continue.
that we're gonna use that the task force has to do it. I thought we were saying that what was in the task force in terms of the work
Mhm.
is still required.
Yeah, and Grover did add objectives, so yeah. Okay, so advocates for,
Proceeding.
Pursuing.
it's a little cleaner.
Honestly, to me, that makes it sound like advocating for the library district task force. If I were
Right.
just the BCC reading it.
Yeah,
That was my concern. So what if we take out, how about we just say advocates pursuing the previously planned evaluation?
Can I jump in for?
Sure.
The previously planned evaluation via the objectives outlined in the library district task force plan.
That's good. I think that sounds good.
All right, any additional thoughts on that?
It was tough. Good work, everybody.
Yeah, and Rick, back to your comments. I do like strongly advocates. I don't want to put, we weakly advocate that. So I think strongly sounds a little bit better.
Sure.
Okay.
That's good. So do we want to replace that, add that to the end, or are we replacing this last sentence here?
I would delete that last sentence and then just make that a new paragraph.
And I still don't like answers to these questions. How about guidance related to these questions? Something, but answers, that's that yes, no thing again.
Yeah.
So guidance related to these questions
Addressing these questions.
or on these issues, addressing?
How about your guidance on these questions will clarify whether, where are we?
Your guidance addressing these questions.
Will clarify.
Thank you.
What
Do we
team?
want to say questions or topics?
How did we phrase it above, Rick? If you could drop that down at that point. Request on the following. Well, we asked questions there, so I can find questions sounds logical.
Perfect. And then Kathleen, were you saying make that last bit a separate paragraph? This
I
part?
think so, because your guidance is really a closing of the
Mhm.
bullet point paragraph.
I have a question about the last sentence that LDAC hopes to present. That, so we're taking it back to us that we're going to give them a solution. Is that what that implies?
Possible ways to approach, maybe not, I think it's back to that other thing. Remember, we're gonna have a subcommittee to look at what are the needs going forward based on looking at the plan and other documents. So maybe it's not a proposal, it's to proposal on possible ways to approach. It says plan evaluation.
Al, it will have to be a proposal because it'll have to be sanctioned by them.
Right, I don't disagree with the proposal, but I'm just saying, we want to say this evaluation might be confusing, even though we strongly advocate approaching maybe instead of this evaluation, such evaluation as noted in the above paragraph. I just want to tie it to that is what I'm trying to say, instead of just saying, we want the proposal to come from us, but we want to say, I don't want to confuse them with evaluation. If they mean the questions we're asking, I want to go back to the evaluation for the previous paragraph. Go ahead, Grover.
Yeah, well, I just, for me, the issue is that we're present a proposal, that's fine, but it really is about the nuance, the essence, all that stuff that we've spent zillions of hours coming up with, and Kathleen said it quite great in the minutes. It's like, it's not that we don't know what to do. So Kathleen says, what do we need to consider, but rather how we're going to get moving. So we don't need to consider, we got it. We just have to mine it right out of that previous work.
Right. And maybe we don't want to hope to present a proposal. Maybe we will present a proposal.
Yes, yes.
We're moving forward to.
Right.
I agree with Al's comment, though, that we don't want them to misinterpret that we're going to propose resolutions to the questions we're asking them in the letter, right? The proposal has to do with the future direction, right, of the district. So we just need to make sure that it can't be interpreted the former way.
You
Maybe
said that
something-
nicely, Mark. What do you say to approach the future of the district?
Yes, instead of evaluation, let's take out the word evaluation. And
Yeah,
just say
just ways to approach, possible ways to approach the future of the district.
future of the district. Very good. Okay.
Are we building a giraffe?
Yep.
Well, maybe we have some strong legs that we're standing on. Okay, does everybody agree with this letter as stated? If I can see a thumbs up from everybody, if you can, Rick, get everybody's thumbs up on this so we can move forward.
Through everybody, Denise.
Okay, yeah. Thank you. Denise said guidance was used too much in that last. We took that out. Good. Okay, we're getting late in the day and I know that this is Zoom, but before we go, I wanted to have two people just that I want to thank who have been on this board. One is Denise and one is Doris. And I'd like them to sort of close out the meeting. Usually I ask everybody's comments. First of all, thank everybody for doing a great job on this letter. And I know we will set up a meeting sometime probably in September, if that's all right with everybody. We'll get word out, but it's been a long meeting. And I just wanted to let Denise and Doris know we appreciate them. So Denise, I'll go to you first, then Doris for last words from you two.
And I think Denise may have mic troubles, so. Wait, there it is. So yeah, Denise said I'm off the board this month.
Okay. So, and Doris,
I'm
long-term.
off the board this month.
Doris, long-term, you've been here. We appreciate you, all you've done for both the directors, the city, the county, because you started as a county employee many years ago as a county employee up in where Rick has his office now. So give us your parting thoughts, Doris.
Hey, it's always been fun. Clackamas County is an interesting place to have a library district. And I think that the way it was formed was great so that we could each meet the needs of our individual communities instead of having it all centralized. And it's been fun. It's been a wild ride sometimes, and good luck.
Thank you, Doris, for all the years that you've been there for all of us. I appreciate it very much. So having said all that.
Hey, Al, can I ask a quick question?
Absolutely, Nick.
I'm just concerned, I don't, what's the process going to be? So we're going to send this to the individual commissioners? We're just going to send it to their, or is Rick going to carry it forward? How are they going to come to a decision on this? And will it be a public meeting? I mean, we're probably one of the few districts that don't really have staff.
Right.
Even Rick is not really in the district, he's in the county staff. So I mean, we don't have to go into detail. I just wondered what.
Well, there are two thoughts. Either Rick can take it, or I'll be happy to take it up to Gary and have him distribute it to the board. Gary is, of course, our county administrator.
Perfect. That's what I okay, good.
Okay. Take it to Gary, sit down with Gary, explain this, and let him handle with the board and say, what do you need? What does the board need from us going forward from here?
Perfect. That's what I was going to recommend that we take it to Gary. So you answered the question. Thank you.
No problem.
And Gary's the library district administrator as well.
Yes.
Right. Because I think somebody has to manage it through the process. And I don't know, I don't know. I know Gary knows it inside and out.
And I don't want to put Rick in any Dutch with the acting like, well, hey, I'm doing this. So I'll work with Rick and I'll hand carry it up to Gary then.
So
I think it has more impact coming from the chair anyway. So I think that's good. Kathleen?
Yeah, Al, may I suggest that you take the last 4 annual report, the compendium, so that they can see the work that has been done, how significant it is, and why it is that, through the detailed analysis, we have questions. I'm not sure he's ever seen those. I'm not sure he might have, but
yeah, that's a good point. I'll be happy to do that. Grover, what else?
Yeah, I just want, Rick, are you gonna send out the revised letter so we can see it?
Absolutely. I'll send that out tomorrow. Do we want to get official approval from everybody after sending it out, or are we don't want to reopen that? And we're good for now. I'll just send you all a copy and
Yes, I think we're good for now. Group editing is not always the easiest thing, but I appreciate everybody's time and patience with each other. And once again, just shows a true collaboration here by everybody. So I appreciate that very much. Yes, Grover.
Yeah, and I just say, we can say, because everybody gave a thumbs up, that we, in this session, approved this.
Agreed. Okay, with that, we will set up, if this is all right with everybody, rather than bog down into dates. I'll work with Rick in setting up a follow-on meeting probably near the end of September, if that's all right with everybody. And that means Doris will miss you at the end of September. But
Paul
having-
Savas is waiting to be let into the meeting.
Oh. Well, Paul, you can come in, but we're about ready to adjourn.
He's not in, only Rick can talk.
Okay.
I just. Right, Al, he's in there.
We should adjourn.
Okay. Paul, we have completed our meeting, and actually, we just heard from Denise and Doris giving their farewell comments as Denise is leaving the board in Canby, and Doris is unfortunately for many of us retiring at the end of July. So we're about ready to adjourn, Paul, but we'll open your thoughts on anything.
Oh, I don't want to hang y'all up. Sorry for my, I was double booked. I just got out of a transportation meeting, and if you were still going, I'd join in, but I hear congratulations to everyone's retirement. I'll see you all next time, I guess.
Thanks so much, Paul. So is there a motion for adjournment then?
Denise moved to adjourn.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye. The ayes have it. Well,
Aye.
everybody have a great summer, everybody, and be safe and be careful. And thank you once again. Thank you all very much for the great work tonight and in the future too. Okay.